Welcome, everyone. My name is Shoham, and this is Alejandro. And we're really happy to welcome you in this live demo about document management with Google Drive. So, Alejandro, welcome to this live demo. So glad to have you
Uh,
here.
Thank you for having me. Hello everyone. My name is Alejandro Rondan. I'm a pre-sales engineer for BonitaSoft. And well, today we're going to discuss how to create a custom connector in BonitaSoft.
So, what? In this live demo, we're going to share how to upload documents created in Bonita to a document management system, which in this case is Google Drive. So if you had attended our previous live demo, we did a similar live demo, but with SharePoint using the Bonita REST connector. However, this time we have a slight twist, and I'll get back to that later. So why? Why should we combine document management and BPM? We know that Google Drive is a content management system that can handle documents, store them, management. So why should we add this to the BPM? It's because we want to benefit from best of the both worlds. The first one is to benefit from the flexibility of content management features, of course, but also we're going to benefit from the flexibility on the management of the process itself. Because what we can do with BPM is to automate and optimize those business processes that handle documents. Most of the time we use document management with BPM is to manage contracts, validate reports, validate payment, request official documents, and of course, add, delete, and archive those documents. So how we are going to do this? If you had attended our previous demo, like we said, we used the Boniteras connector. However, this time we cannot use our Boniteras connector. So what? Bonita is all about extensibility. And thanks to Alejandro, he made a custom connector just for this live demo. So kudos to you, Alejandro. Just I want to talk a bit about Bonita and extensibility. So Bonita provides a rich set of features by default. However, if a project has a need that was not anticipated and cannot be met by the default features, Bonita has been designed to be extensible, just like in this case. So we will also demonstrate Bonita's extensibility in this live demo. But for this, we're going to create a document based on data and then store them in the document system. We will use our official procurement example for this. And today in this live demo, we're going to show you why, via this example of document management, how to integrate Bonita with Google Drive, where Bonita and Google Drive are integrated together thanks to the custom connector that Alejandro built. So what we're going to do is to create folders from Bonita directly to Google Drive. And then Bonita is going to push these documents to Google Drive in the right folders. And I will now let Alejandro get into a bit more details about the custom connector itself.
Thank you for the introduction, Sam. Okay, let's explain a little bit. One of the main benefits of creating a custom connector is that as a developer, we can make easier the implementation and the integration to what we call a citizen developer, someone, for example, a business analyst that knows some technical issues, but is not a developer. He won't be able to create a lot of code. So in that way, we can just create this custom connector in which you just have to parameterize configure this connector with the valid information, and that he can introduce and integrate into his process and create the processes that he might. So how we're going to do that? It's going to be first, of course, we're going to use the Google Drive API. It's the Google Drive API tree. First, of course, you need to have some authentication. We're going to handle that authentication via a service account. This is for making a faceless server-to-server connection. That means that we won't have, for example, the request for validate the user or choose the account. It will be a server-to-server connection. And after that, we're going to use the Google Drive API to create and populate read documents from a drive or a folder from a drive. So this way, we can use the documentation that they use, the API that they expose via Java, and we can integrate it with one of our connectors. So how do you create a connector in Bonita? Well, it's easy. You just use the archetype. We provide the archetypes for developers, so they can use, they can create either connectors, well, any type of extensibility, either by connectors or actor filters or API extensions or even themes. We can create them using our favorite IDE. If you prefer IntelliJ or VSC or etc., you can use your own IDE and have the create development for this connector, for this extension, for be to use on the drive itself. So for that, let's show you hand-to-hand how to do it. So first, I'm going to show you. We have a IDE. So I have a Visual Studio, and I have an empty project. So you can see the demo webinar is completely empty. So I'm going to use the archetype, the connector archetype, to create this information. So for that, it's going to be very, very simple, very, very easy. We just head to our documentation, our Bonita documentation, where we can explain all the process, all the prerequisites that you have, for example, having Java, having Maven to use the project, etc. And I'm just going to use the command, the Maven command, to create a project using our archetype. So I copy paste this, and we're going to see that we're going to have an interactive request. So the archetype is going to ask you for some parameters, some that we're going to set up. So for example, what is the group ID? Well, as we know, the proposed group ID basically is the folder in the repository that we're going to store our artifacts. So we can say, for example, com Bonita Soft presales, since it's the presales team that is developing this artifact. So then we got the artifact. So for example, we can call it connector webinar. Let's just go for an example. And we select the version 1.0, same package. The Bonita version, we're going to use the technical Bonita version. So it's not the year dot the number. It's going to be 7 point something, 8 point something. So we're going to use the latest available versions, which is the 7.13.1. And we can create the connectors, the class name for our connector. So let's say it's going to be connector webinar, something like that. Then we can choose the language. So for example, we can choose Java or Groovy, which is an extension for Java. We have some stuff. Or even if you're familiarized and available, you can use Kotlin. So we can, for example, use Java since it's the most used one, the most common. We are going to include a Maven wrapper inside the project so we can build the archetype, and then we just create the version. So that way we're going to download this archetype already configured, pre-configured for us to start. So once that we have it, we can see that we have now the project with all the correct files and architecture that we might need for the project. So we can go for source, for example, and we will have our Java classes already ready to start the development. So we can actually input here our business logic. So what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? So for a quick demo, so now we are going to go to our project, the connector for Google Drive. So as you can see here, we created the Google Drive. We have one library that will have all the necessary functions that are required to connect to use the Google Drive API. And we will have our main class to the connector. So we'll have, for example, all the parameters that we need, how to validate that these parameters are valid, they're in a valid form, and do some checks. And then we can launch our business logic, which in this case is going to be create a new folder, upload a file in this folder, etc., retrieve the information from these uploaded files, and then we have it in our documentation. So it's as easy as developing in Java or Groovy or any language that, of course, as a developer, you may know already. And that way you can create. And after you create, of course, we're going to build this and publish this Maven artifact. Then we can also have some tests for the files for the class. So we can add some tests, of course, mocking special parts. Since, for example, we might need mock what is doing the BPM and API engine, we can actually have to retrieve some information. So we can mock that just for the test. And then on the pre-sales team, for the publishing and storage of our archetypes, we use Git Actions. And so for that, once we upload this project into our GitHub, we can see that we will have our different actions that are required. So for example, we're going to have the action to build and to action to do the tag and release to deploy. So we just build these actions, and then we will have a completely published package that it can be added to the Bonita project. So for example, if we go to the package that has been published, we can have this information for the group ID, the artifact, and the version, and we can give it to a business analyst so he can import this connector inside his project, his automation project, configure it, and use it. So with that, it will be very, very easy to use. And to prove you how easy it's going to be to use, I'm going to let our dear Soham to give you to the rest.
Thank you, Alejandro, for the explanation. And so now that the custom connector is developed and published in the Maven repository by Alejandro, we can add it as an extension in the Bonita project. But just before that, let me explain to you the process that is going on here. As you can see, we have a requester doing the procurement requests, and we have the suppliers here. The idea is to have the requester send proposals to some suppliers. The suppliers respond if they're willing to, or if they want a different price or something. And then suppliers propose and complete the quotations. And after that, the requester can review the proposals and select the most suitable supplier. And after that, it's here where Bonita will generate documents in both Word and PDF format and upload them to Google Drive. So that's the main idea, as simple as that. So let's import the connector now. Go to Overview, Extensions, add a custom connector, and version. Okay, import. The configuration is of this connector is via Wizard, so a process designer does not require the developer knowledge to integrate this. And now we go back to the procurement requests. We go back here, execution, connectors out. And here we add the connector that Alejandro made. Let's just name it upload files to Drive. Now I'm going to create a new parameter.
One of the reasons to create a parameter for a process is because this gives us two main advantages. One is that you can update those parameters live without having the need to redeploy the process. And second, it allows you, for example, in this case, that we are adding an authentication credentials, we can add them as a secret, and we can add them on the deployment of the process or the living applications. So that way, the developer or the person developing doesn't need to have the information in the code. And now, well, he's just adding some script just to change dynamically the name of the folder that he's going to create on Google Drive to add, for example, data from the case itself. So for example, we're going to retrieve the dates, we're going to retrieve what case number it is, so we can find it easy on our Google Drive.
Now I'm just going to save this. And now we go to configure, where we will put the configure local, and we put the parameters here, just here. And now let's run the process. So what we have here is a living application handling procurement requests. The requester can choose to describe the need and choose suitable suppliers. we're gonna look for maybe a new laptop. I don't know. And of course, we have to pick the suppliers that we want. And we send the request. Now I'm going to be the supplier and propose prices. Let's say 2K, that's price. The supplier doesn't want to answer, out of stock. And now I'm going to take the role of the requester and pick the best price. So this is the best price, and I click on accept. And now we should have this automatically on the Google Drive. Let me just open the Google Drive here. As you can see, the today's date and the requester ID, we have two files here, the PDF with the supplier details and everything that has been generated about the laptop, the XPS, and same with the document file. And it's time for questions. Okay, so first question we have, are all connectors available in the community version?
Well, to answer that question, yes, this connector will be available in the community version. You can run it in the community version since it doesn't require any of the values that we have on the subscription. And actually, we're going to upload this this connector into our community, so everyone will be able to use it, retrieve it, and use the code. And if you want to actually participate and contribute to the process, you can also open, since it's an open source project.
And so let's move to the second question. You can make code that make a folder, assign an ID number to this folder, and put inside a document within Google Drive storage.
Yes, for this class, we are actually the library that we are using. So as you can see, you're watching the library that we're going to use, actually the library that we developed for this connector. And we have some cases, for example, to create a folder that we can set the ID for the parent folder, or in case there's no folder, we can create a drive ID. And the drive ID is assigned by Google system. So it's generated by the Google system after you upload or create a file or folder. Well, this is a quick, I think it's a fun fact. For the Google API, a folder and a file is the same. They treat them both as the same. So once that you create, you can have this, you create this file, you're going to have an ID assigned by Google to this file. And this is how you get the ID. But you cannot force the creation of that ID, at least not in the Google Drive APIs as they stand today.
So the next question is, hello, in this demo, are you using Bonitasoft Community or Enterprise Edition?
Yes, actually, as you can see, well, we developed the connector using an IDE. So in this case, we use IntelliJ open source. So you don't need the enterprise version for this development. And as I said before, we are not using any particular value from the enterprise edition. We are not using the monitoring, we are not using the clustering, so we can use the community artifacts and libraries that we can import and use them without any problems.
Do you provide any way to automate, import, config, and develop steps of a connector? It would be very handy for the development.
Actually, you can have the development of a connector or any other kind of extension. You can add them to a CI. So you can have the build, the testing, and the deployment of this kind of artifact in automatic fashion. You can do that. It's available. However, well, it's not Bonita who is going to give you these tools, since these are more tools, developer tools. For example, if you are using as us, or you are using GitHub Actions, or you are going to use Jenkins or any other type of automation server. You can do that. It's a question of adapting to them, and then you can just add the documentation playlist or the steps that you might need. So build, test, deploy it, create the release, create the tag, etc. All this information you can automatize and do it by yourself.
My question is, does a process instance have to be created to update or delete a document, or can it be done using a custom connector?
For the moment, the custom connector only has one implementation. A connector can have different implementation. To give you an example, if you use the REST connector, you can have different implementations. You can have implementations for a post, a put, delete, or get, according to the different actions that you can have in a REST call. Same can be applied to this connector. For the moment, we only have one implementation, which is upload a file, but we can add, or actually, since it's an open source project, you can contribute if you feel to add more implementations, like, for example, read content from a folder, delete content from a folder, or any other type of information that we might want, update a file, etc. All of these cases, you can have them as implementations for the drive. Whatever, once you connect this to, when you configure this connector inside a process, you will have to start a case to use this connector. So you, in any case, new case is going to use the connector and goes to do the performance, perform the test that you added the implementation. This is on because, well, we want any task done or any actions done to be completely traceable and completely stored in the process database.
Connector is valid to be used in Bonita 7.12, or it's only with Bonita 7.13 and is the process's migration from 7.12 to 7.13 applicable?
So yeah, actually, as you checked before, when we were creating the archetype for the connector, you have the version to establish the base or the intended version of Bonita for this connector. We established it's going to be the 7.13, so you can use it from the 7.13, which means is the 2021.2, and you can use them for starting this version. If you want to use it in a previous process, you will have to update to at least 21.2, so you can use this one.
Without using Bonita Studio, can we do these steps using a Maven or other scripts?
For the connector, as you can see, you can do all the development outside of Bonita Studio. As you can see, I actually don't even have the Bonita Studio open in my screen, but you can create the development of the connectors, any extensions that you can do it outside of the Bonita Studio, and then to use it and to integrate it into your project, automation project, you will need to use the Bonita Studio as a composer, so you can bring this artifact and use it in whatever place. For example, in this case, it was in that precise task that Soham added the connector to use it. So all these parts, of course, you will need the Bonita Studio. Actually, as you can see, the build and the publication of the process of the connector is done in Bonita using on GitHub using the GitHub Actions. So here we can see all the steps of the process that we need to configure, to install the Maven, etc. All the configuration, all the tests, you can use them here in GitHub without having to use them.
Thanks for your clarification, but is the migration from Bonita 2021.1 to 2021.2 is applicable, or I will re-implement the process again from scratch?
Oh no, you can migrate. Actually, the migration from 2021 to 2020.2 is quite easy. We are doing it in our repositories, for example, our showroom for the pre-sales, we already done the migration. You have two parts. One part that it might be a bit more, might need some more refreshment or thought process is going to be to externalize the extensions. Before in Bonita, all the extensions, for example, connectors, a REST API, actor filters, etc., could be developed inside the Bonita Studio. And now we are moving to a more of a project composition where all these elements of extensions can be developed outside of Bonita Studio and bricked up as any Maven project. In this case, if you want to start the process of the Mavenization of your project, that's going to take you some time to, of course, bring out the extensions from Bonita, from the Bonita project to outside. You have to think, for example, where you're going to store these artifacts, where you're going to publish them, where you're going to store them, and how to use them and bring them to the project, how to import them. But the migration, you can work as you were on 2021.1, same as you were working on 2020.2, and do this migration, this externalization of artifacts at your pace later. Don't worry, you can add it at your own time.
In this process, we're sharing the credentials, right? So what are the best security practices to keep the credentials safe,
So as we saw, we started to use one of the first steps of the good practice is to use parameters on everything that is an authentication passwords or keys, etc. You can use them as parameters. This way, as I said before, you don't need them to include them in the project or in the GitHub repository to have them, so it won't be public. And then you can use any other automatization process, for example, as I said before, using Jenkins or GitHub Action, etc. And you can replace those parameters with the secrets that you might have associated. This way, you have all your secrets encrypted and used safely, and only transfer when you need to use them when you're going to deploy.
What about this custom connector, Alejandro? Will we have access to this?
Yes, of course. As I said before, we're going to share this on our Bonita community. So you will have access to the source code and also to the different files. So you can use them in your own projects, on your own project, either on community or in enterprise. You can use them free as shards, no worries. And if you feel like contributing to our magnificent community, feel free to add anything on this connector. For example, let's say that the examples that we say before, a new implementation for delete the file or read the content of a folder, etc. You can contribute for this case.
I will invite Alejandro to tell me a bit more about the best practices we can do when we're performing such a task.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, but first, I'm not a developer. I'm not trained to be a developer. And one of the first, well, let's not say mistakes, but kind of things that I miss, and it could be a good practice, is that I declared this project as a Java project. I should have declared as a Groovy project for one reason. Groovy since it's an extension of Java, you can use Java, pure Java, if you want, but you also have some easier syntax on Groovy that you can use. You can also have some extensions for testing, and that can be more useful, especially for the unit tests that you're going to launch for the project before building. And actually will give you more independence, more freedom, and it's a bit easier to write the code. That's just one advice. And the other advice is, well, it will be as any advice as you may have with any other development. So be clear, be concise with your code, comment. You can work in a collaborative fashion using Git, for example, and work with a team. I work with my colleagues in pre-sales. They helped me a lot during this project, and so you can have this and work those applications. Then actually, that's one of the freedoms that we like to give using Bonita is that there's no any requirement, very particular requirement. You can use any ID that you like, any language that you feel comfortable, any other methodology or strategy that we have is completely compatible with Bonita. So we don't like to impose any of our information.
So we have another question. What is the capacity for sending to other platforms the build process for use in another software, the versions of diagrams?
Well, in that case, I'm sorry, I cannot tell you if any other VPN platform is compatible with this sort of Java connectors extensibilities. For example, this one it might not work since we're actually using some Bonita's API. For example, when retrieving the documents, since we're using documents from the Bonita case, we're actually using the API to call to use the process, the Bonita BPM API to retrieve the document of that case and input them into the files. So of course that part won't work with any other than Bonita Soft. But then it's a question of more the openness of other platforms than from Bonita. Bonita, as you can see, is open source, so you can do it. No questions asked, no problems.
Okay, we have another question. Will you leave an example process in the community of Bonita? So yes, the procurement example is an official example from Bonita. It's already available in the Bonita Soft community. It has been updated with the latest, with the live demo before we did with about SharePoint. It has been upgraded with that. And yes, you can download it from our official examples.
As to download the version with the management connector, yes. Well, we can see if there's interest. I don't know. Let us know. You will be interested to see this connector in use. We can create a new version of this process. We can have another example, not only SharePoint, but also with the connector. But as you can see, the connector is actually quite easy to implement. It's not like the REST API, the configuration for SharePoint, where you have to use some different calls and some different connectors to retrieve the keys, to retrieve the tokens, then to create the folders, etc. It's in just one connector. It's easily packaged. So you have only, sorry, a little wizard with 2 screens and some parameters to use. So in terms of usability, it's very easy to use. It's very easy to integrate. And this is one of the reasons why you might want to create a custom connector, is that to make this as easy as possible for the end user. Well, not the end user, but the business analyst who is creating the process. Or the marketing, for example, and so on.
Right. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for this live demo. And right now we have run out of time. So thanks a lot and stay tuned in the community for more updates. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.